Okay, I've got a great show for you today. I have with me Dick Morris to go over what's going on against Donald Trump, how he can still win the election, all of the lawfare that's being used against him. Dick, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Well, good. Thank you, Steve. I'm glad to be here, but your introduction's a little more negative than I feel. I think that Trump is winning by a good margin.
Well,
The
that's why I want
lawsuit,
you on.
the lawsuits aren't going to matter at all, and that this is just noise. And in fact, Trump is absolutely on the verge of one of the biggest landslides we've ever had.
Okay. I want to hear that. I think my audience wants to hear that because my worry is their main plan is not an October surprise. I'm sure that will come, but the main plan has been this lawfare, all of these different lawsuits, bleeding him dry financially, taking him off the campaign trail, threats of jailing him for life. What are you seeing that we're not that leads you to believe he's on the path to a big landslide win?
Well, first of all, the most recent polling by, in this case, Rasmussen, has Trump ahead by 8 points, 49 to 41, and particularly winning the Latino vote by 14 points, having lost it by close to 30 points in 2020. And when we asked, and we with the black vote, we got 12% of it in 2020, and we're now winning. One poll says 40. I think that's a little high. I think it's more like 33, but still a huge increase. Among under 30-year-old voters who we lost by a lot last time, we're now, I think we lost them, I forget the number, but I can look it up for you, but we lost them by a lot. And now we lost them, as I recall, by 15, and we're now carrying them by 11 under 30 voters. Uh, Independents, who we lost dramatically last time, we're winning very well. So I think that our poll numbers are fantastic. I think that voters are discounting all of this stuff. They believe that they know that it's partisan. They know that it's not the judicial system at work; it's the political system at work. And frankly, I believe these charges are, in a sense, helping Trump. First of all, I think they trigger a backlash. They frame the concept and make it clear that the establishment hates him and fears him and is doing everything it can to stop him. And secondly, it sucks all the air out of the room. There's no time for anyone to talk about anything else. You can't criticize Trump on tariffs or on the deficit or on deregulation because the issue is, do you think he should go to jail or not? And and as a result, there's no way that the Democrats really can launch a campaign on anything other than these lawsuits. And when you dig down in these lawsuits, Stephen, there are four of them, but probably only one of them is coming to trial now. The porn one, Stormy Daniels, and the idea that he had sex with her is not a crime. The idea that he may have lied about it is not a crime. The idea that he might have paid her off to be silent about it is not a crime. But the fact that he took it from his left pocket as opposed to his right pocket, no ideology there. In other words, he funded it out of his business expenses, not out of his campaign money. That's the charge they're bringing. And to think that that's a felony or B, serious, I think is absurd. And I think that even if he gets past the gag order and past the obvious bias of the prosecution, the obvious selective prosecution, and gets to the underlying nature of the offense, voters are going to say, "So what?" And so I think he's doing fine.
Okay. Well, that's good to know because I was reading that he had said, if I end up going to jail, I'm happy to be a modern day Nelson Mandela. It led me to believe that maybe he thought that some of these charges were going to land. But Trump,
It may, it may,
tends
he may
to.
he may be in jail. They what they did was that they had a corrupt judge whose daughter was a Democratic partisan, and they assigned the judge to the case, and he wouldn't recuse himself. And then they imposed a gag order to stop Trump from talking about it. And Trump isn't good at stopping. And and if he does talk about it, they might put him in prison for a couple of days and I don't think it's going to matter. I think if anything, it'll be like like Christ's crucifixion. It'll be, a badge of honor, red badge of courage. I think they called it during the Civil War.
Well, the last time he was arrested and mugshotted, it led to $10 million in new campaign money, and also it took him higher in the polls.
He
So
called me. He called me on his car phone as he was on his way to Miami to get booked and fingerprinted, and he said, "How am I doing?" I said, "Great, you're up 11 points."
oh,
And then I said, "You should get indicted more often."
oh my gosh, he's got so much courage and such a great sense of humor. It's amazing. One thing I wanted to ask you about is District Attorney Fani Willis. She's been caught lying. She perjured herself. She abused government funds, enriched herself financially and her lover. Now she's been caught secretly recording phone calls in order to get Trump. How is she not removed? Is this just
Well,
liberal privilege? What is going on? There's no ethics or law anymore.
yeah, we're dealing with stuff where the corruption of the left is so fully exposed, and the outrageousness of the conduct is so clear. And all of these cases have become more about the prosecution than about Trump. The Stormy Daniels case is more about should he be gagged or not. The Fani Willis case is the stuff you outlined about her lover. Uh, the documents case is did Biden do the same thing and why didn't you arrest him for it? And all of these have basically diverted from the major question the Democrats want, which is guilt or innocence on the basic charge. And further, I don't think any of these cases, except for this Stormy Daniels case, is going to come up before the election for trial. And obviously, I think if so, I don't think these are going to matter at all. If anything, they're going to help them.
Okay. Yeah, and I've been exposing that. Judge Merchan's daughter has raised over $90 million for Biden, Harris, Adam Schiff, and others. They're incredibly partisan, but I think he'll be able to navigate through that, and we'll see what happens. One thing I wanted to get your thoughts on, Dick, is Letitia James, the Attorney General. She is now blocking Trump's ability for his $175 million bond to actually go through and be processed. Some people are saying that this is to slow him down from getting his appeal. While I'm also reading that others are saying no, behind the scenes, she's actually getting all the paperwork in order to start confiscating his assets. If she starts taking his property, what do the American people do? What would be the reaction?
Well, I think the first thing that'll happen is that the court will. The court has, I think, already reduced the size of the verdict from 450 million to 150 million, and that's a small amount. Trump can raise that any day, and I think that I don't think that case is going to have the lethality that it did when the jury went so crazy with its verdict.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's good to know because I saw there was a pollster and his name escapes me, but he was on CNN. He said, "Do not take his properties. He will make himself the greatest martyr in history, and he'll win the election by a landslide." But from your thinking, he's going to do that anyway.
Yeah, he's 2/3 right.
Yeah. Okay. Going down to Argentina, the new president down there, Javier Milei, he
He just
said,
Let me just say before we continue that
yes.
he was my client.
Oh, was he? Okay, great. So he's saying that communism and socialism have hijacked Argentina. He fires 10,000 government workers, 70,000 government contractors. This is what I see as cleaning out the swamp. Is it possible to do something similar in a Trump second term?
Yeah, not those numbers are more because of Argentina's budget deficit than any particular malfeasance by the people who he's firing. Um, Before I answer that, let me just call attention to Brazil, where Bolsonaro, the former president, who did a wonderful job, he cut the murder rate by 75%, and was a great president. He was voted out of office legitimately. I don't think that election was rigged. But now the president Lula and his and the judge who he appointed are banning the internet, banning X, Twitter, from Brazil, and cutting off all revenue to Twitter from Brazil, simply in a political move. And this presages the growth of dictatorship. I think the left is increasingly going to lose elections, like they lost in Argentina and like they're about to lose in the US, and will resort to tactics like banning Twitter and banning other internet outlets to keep themselves in power. Now, in terms of your question, there's relief on the way in the form of Schedule F. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Uh, yeah. Normally, you have two kinds of employees in government: civil service and exempt. Exempt mean that they're political; they can be fired at will. And we have about 4,000 exempt employees in the federal government, and about 2.2 million covered civil service employees in the federal system, federal government. And what Trump is doing is proposing a legislation to impose Schedule F, which would be a new schedule, sort of a third tier there, who would be people who are involved in policymaking, and they may be fired or removed or transferred at the will of the executive. And this is a crucial element in dismembering the deep state. We went through a period in this country where, after the Civil War, we had a huge expansion of the federal bureaucracy. And the Republicans who ran the country then took advantage of it to appoint all kinds of corrupt people to office, and led to all kinds of scandals, even led to a presidential assassination of James Garfield. And the Republicans recovered and realized their errors and passed civil service reform, and the Democrats extended that, and that was very important. But it's run its course. It's now become a vehicle for sustaining the deep state and protecting people from the consequences of public opinion. And so this is really a mechanism now to avoid accountability, and Trump is going to supersede it. And I think that's going to be very important in dismantling the deep state.
Okay. You mentioned, avoiding accountability. You also mentioned earlier in the show that Biden is starting to lose among younger voters. Trump is picking that up. Yesterday, the Biden administration said, screw the Supreme Court and trying to block us from buying votes. I mean, forgiving student loan debt. Do you think that the timing of this has to do with trying to buy votes in November by forgiving student loan debt for voters?
Of course it does, and obviously it does. And Biden is fighting very hard on this. I don't think he's going to succeed either in forgiving the loans or in getting the votes. I think the reason that the Gen Z, which is under 25, and millennial, which is 25 to 40, are turning on Biden, and Gen Z is turning on in massive numbers, is because of the invisible scar left by the lockdowns. I think that people who are under 25 were blocked from their athletic careers. They couldn't go out for teams. They were blocked from dating. They were blocked from starting their careers. In many cases, blocked from moving out of their mother's basement. And they have suffered the boot of tyranny in a way that most Americans have not. And then it turns out this was all irrelevant because young people weren't getting COVID. And the people who you were knocking off the football fields and disqualifying had no role in spreading the disease. And young people have seen this now. And as the victims of tyranny, they understand how vicious the deep state can be. So I think that's the reason that it's shifting. Also, obviously, the employment situation is hurting young people more than anyone else because they don't have the traction in their careers. I'm just going to stay with you, but I'm going to go to another video on my end just so I can quote some real numbers to you.
Okay.
Just bear with me a moment. Well, I'm not skilled enough, but Trump has gone from winning in 2020, losing the votes of Gen Z voters by about 15 points, to now winning them by about 10 points. Been a major turnaround.
Yes.
And don't forget, Gen Z is a forever gift. They become Z plus, Z2, Z3, and it's like the snake that swallowed the mouse. It goes through the body, and you see it, and we'll see it for many, many elections to come. And I think that the backlash against the COVID restrictions, where people saw the raw boot of tyranny, I think is having a big effect.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent observation. Couple more questions. I appreciate you coming on. Jamie Raskins is trying to whip enough votes in order to get Congress to label Donald Trump as an insurrectionist so that they can remove him from the ballot on a national level. Is this also just a waste of time, another Democrat idea that will go nowhere?
Yeah, it's another soundbite. It's another press release. But the Supreme Court's foreclosed that. And nothing's going to open it.
Okay. Okay. That was my worry, was that they opened the door for him to do that. But you're saying that this is just all talk because ultimately the Supreme Court's decision against Colorado will cover Trump?
Yeah, and they would need to pass both houses to do that. I think by 2/3 in some cases. I don't think that's just a fantasy.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Okay. Final question here. How dangerous is it to remove immunity from a US president? And are Democrats being short-sighted? Because couldn't this open up liability for Biden and Obama as well as future Democrat presidents?
Well, future presidents. Let's bear in mind how presidential immunity started. It started with a subversive named George Washington, and he was president, and he had negotiated a treaty with the British called the Jay Treaty by John Jay, the future Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And the treaty caused tremendous opposition in the U.S. because Americans felt it was biased against us, and we were giving Britain a great deal of privilege in order to avoid a war with them. The war ultimately came, but the Congress, which was controlled by Jefferson, demanded that Washington provide the diplomatic correspondence he had with John Jay, so that Americans could see whether Washington had authorized this or not, and could be used as a tool to attack Washington. And Washington said, "Hey, wait a minute. When I get advice from a member of my cabinet or a member of my or close advisor, you don't have the right to see that advice. You can see what I did. You can see the actions I took, but not the advice I was given. And if you demand to see it, nobody's going to give me advice because they're all going to be worried about being dragged through public opinion." So he asserted the doctrine of executive privilege in really the first year or two in office. And since the foundation of our republic, that's been a very important element. And the free flow of advice to a president is very important. Um, I've represented Bill Clinton when he was in office, and I didn't want my advice to him to be published. I wouldn't have given it if it were. And I think that, so I think this is pernicious, the lifting of presidential privilege. Um, but again, this is in the context of the charges against Trump, and I don't think that we need executive privilege to beat those charges. And I think even if we were to lose over executive privilege, the electorate wouldn't take account of it and would still vote for us.
Okay, interesting. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. You have two great books out that I'm going to put down below: The Return, How Donald Trump Can Become President Again, and also Corrupt, about Joe Biden's 50+ year career of doing nothing for the country except for enriching himself off of his government positions. I'm going to put those down below. I want people to go buy those, go check those out. Dick Morris, you are a treasure to this country. Thank you for everything you're doing. I know that Trump leans on your advice. You have a brilliant mind. You have the ability to see through the fog of war. I want to thank you again for coming on. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Very nice of you. Thank you, Stephen.